football is for nerds? Well, prepare to get your socks knocked off as we show you how you can use fantasy football as a valid excuse for goofing off in class. For those of you who don't get how football or fantasy football works, let me explain it to you in 6 to 7 quick seconds. Football is a sport where a bunch of athletic dudes get on a field for 3 hours and throw a ball around to a couple of dudes on their team, with the other team trying to stop that from happening. Both teams switch between having the ball and not having it throughout the game, and whoever has the most points at the end wins. Shocker. Football has 4 important offensive players: the quarterback who throws the ball, receivers who catch the ball, running backs who, well, just run the ball while occasionally catching them, and tight ends who are just XL-sized receivers. Fantasy football, by contrast, is a bunch of unathletic dudes who agree to role-play, managing a football team for a year for the sole purpose of bragging rights if they beat their friends. Fantasy football uses a predetermined scoring system to tally the performance of players from across the NFL every week, and the made-up team with the most points in a week wins. Now, how are these fantasy football teams made, you ask? Just a bunch of self-proclaimed geniuses picking from a pool of players they think will be good, which usually ends up backfiring in their faces as the player just sucks or somehow tears every ligament in their body when they pick them. Sounds like an absolute waste of time, on par with doom scrolling on Instagram, and you'd mostly be right, but there is a saving grace to this: statistics. Now don't scroll away. I'm not here to bore you with a friggin' packet of work or something. When picking which players to draft, most people go off vibes, but if you are truly employed, you can analyze what players to pick using statistical analysis. ADP, or average draft position stats, are compiled by fantasy apps, which give you an idea of when to draft a player. Projections of how a player will do in a given season are done by taking data from previous seasons and basically throwing it into a complicated equation that a bunch of nerds made. They take the average of how a player did the previous season, account for other variables like age, and spit out a projection. And you can either trust this or go off aura. You can go beyond these given equations and do your own research looking at the player's opponents for the year. If you want a quarterback like my glorious King Josh Allen, you can look at his schedule and see how his opponents usually do against other quarterbacks, and account for this in your analysis. Now, I don't want to bore you to death with this statistical stuff, but it shows a level of depth to this pastime that most people do not appreciate. So the next time your parents complain about you being on your phone, show them the fantasy football app with all its numbers and call it stats homework. They will believe you.